Thank you all again for joining tonight. It's really exciting to be able to do this, and I think we have some good tools at our disposal to make this pretty smooth and as seamless as possible virtually. So let's just get started with some quick introductions. We can kind of go around and just quickly say your name if you're representing an organization, and really quickly in 10 or 15 seconds why you're joining us tonight. So I can start. My name is Hogan Edelberg. I'm a landscape architect with AECOM, the consulting engineer on the project, and I'll be facilitating this breakout room tonight. I don't know if everyone is, yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
Oh, I'll hop in. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph, and I'm helping out with the community engagement aspect of this project. And so tonight I will be sharing my screen with this Miro board that we've constructed and taking notes to get all the input that we collect from you tonight.
And I know we have a couple folks from Battery Park City on the line too, who've joined us. Maybe Kim and Nick, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves too.
Hi, everybody. Kim Robledo, Associate Project Manager, Battery Park City Authority. I'm part of the project management team of the Coastal Resilience Project.
Thank you, Kim. I don't know if everyone is in the same order as I'm seeing them, but maybe we can go down the line. So first I see Sarah.
Hey there, I'm Sarah Radelet. I live in Brooklyn, but I have extensive kind of experience working with environmental nonprofits, and I'm part of an organization called Solar One. I am not officially representing Solar One, but we manage the park at Stuyvesant Cove Park, and we are part of the East Coast Resiliency Project. And so I am personally and professionally motivated to join and understand these additional projects that are involved with the coastal resiliency for New York City. Happy to meet you all.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Next I see Deborah Campbell.
Yeah, this is Deborah. I have a good little laugh here. I'm from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, and I'm just dropping in because I'm interested in planning. I have a solid background in planning. My PhD is in planning, so I don't know whether I'm welcome, but I thought, well, it's interesting just to hear what you have to say. I'm very much into the community engagement and inclusive processes. So.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. That's not what I was expecting, but wonderful.
I'll just sit back and listen.
Great. Yeah, thanks for joining. Next on my list is Natasha Camarillo. Are you still having mic and camera issues, Natasha? If so, we can go ahead and skip. I think that might be a yes. And Betty Kay is with us tonight.
Hi, I'm Betty Kay, and I'm a resident of Battery Park City, and I live on River Terrace. So as you can tell, I'm in the first line that the water would hit anyway. So that's my interest.
Thank you, Betty. We have, I think, the farthest and maybe the closest guest tonight.
True.
And Jose Class.
Hi, good evening. I am a member of one of the teams on the Progressive Design Build pursuit, and I'm joining tonight to just get firsthand knowledge of what is important to the community, as that will help guide the overall program, and certainly is something that would be very interested in, understanding, so that if we are selected, we could better serve the goals for the whole project and the community. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Jose. Next we have Brittany.
Hi, my name is Brittany Erez. I'm actually part of the newly formed Battery Park Neighborhood Association. though I'm not necessarily representing them. I'm representing myself as a Battery Park resident. I live in 212 Warren, which is also right where we're talking about, right? It's right in my front yard. And I was actively involved in the summer's activities where we actively tried to save our Rockefeller Park. So definitely interested in the plans here. I did attend one of the walks as well, and there were some interesting ideas put out during that walk. So interested to have this discussion. I did want to ask a question of Sarah, who is on here. Is your involvement on that East River Park project that's just broke ground? Is that what the east side is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's well, for 15 years, the nonprofit that I work for has been managing Stuyvesant Cove Park, which is this tiny little park right at East River and 23rd Street, like between 23rd and 20th.
Okay.
And 20th and 23rd. And it has launched the construction for that east side coastal resiliency project started in 2021. So we are at the forefront of protecting the Lower East Side from future floods. And I am new to the organization and just trying to familiarize myself with all of the ins and outs of these projects across Lower Manhattan, but also want to just, kind of couch my comments from the perspective of a person who spent the past 5 years working for an organization called C40 Cities that is all about greenhouse gas reductions and long-term sustainability of cities globally. And this series of projects around Lower Manhattan has the potential to serve as an unbelievable resource for the rest of the global community. And I'm just extremely interested in how things progress and being able to sort of document the work and especially the processes that are very uniquely New York City with respect to these community meetings, the expertise that comes in, community involvement. And now I'm speaking too much, so I'm going to just shut up and.
No, it's helpful. I was wondering because we were approached by, I don't remember, the Friends of East Riverside Park to help them at one point this summer. And I wasn't sure if you were on part of that organization that's trying to halt construction or part of the construction of the redevelopment of there. That was
no, I'll clarify. Thanks for mentioning that. The park that our organization is part of is north of that. That East Side Park is a different project altogether. I think it's a different, or at least it's in a different phase. And, we are not officially part of the work that is, protesting or trying to figure out how to kind of align what needs to happen there at that East River Park with the need for the flood protection.
Okay, it's helpful. Sorry that I asked the question. We can go on to the next person, but
yeah, we just have a couple. No problem. We just have a couple more people, and then we can get into it. I think we have Jed Russell on the line.
Hi, I'm Jed Russell. I live a little bit above the area, but I'm also a land use attorney, and so that's why I'm interested in all of this.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining. And Rebecca Chris.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Chris. I'm from AKRF, which is part of the AECOM team, and I'm just listening in.
Awesome. Okay, so just a couple housekeeping things. I probably should have said this first. These are being recorded. You probably heard the notification when we all joined. There's going to be 3 12-minute activities we're going to go through, as Nora mentioned, over the next 45 minutes or so, or more like 35 minutes now. And if you want to jump in, but maybe you don't feel comfortable or can't get off mute fast enough, feel free to raise your hand or use a reaction, and we'll keep an eye out for that to make sure we get as much input as possible. Before we move on, this is really about you guys, especially the residents here. So wanted to see who may be interested in being our sort of champion to report back at the end of this to the full group after we go through and sort of go through each one of these activities and collect a couple key takeaways. Any volunteers?
I'm happy to try to chime in. I'm also have 2 kids at home, and it could be potentially right at bedtime, but I'm happy to partner with someone.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Brittany. And if kids jump in, that's totally understandable. Great. So let's get into it. I think let's get into activity 1. So Joseph Smith is controlling the board here. What we have in the Miro board is a couple of different things. You're looking at kind of our overall plan of Battery Park City here. And on that plan, you'll see a couple of different areas that are color-coded, labeled reach 1 through 7. A reach is really just a term to describe sort of a linear form of measurement along a waterway. And that's the way that we've broken up the project area as a whole, as a way to be able to dive into each area and understand the kind of unique configuration in each one. We always kind of say in the project team that this is really almost a one large project made up of all these different sub-projects, because each area is unique and has its own set of characteristics that have to be taken into account. So what we want to hear from you today about is to start is what do you about the current uses. And before we kind of jump into that, I just want to point out that below this map, we also have enlargement maps. Thank you, Joseph. So if it's helpful to look at photos or zoom into a particular area with a bit more detail, we can always come down here to check that out if it helps kind of jog your memory. Okay, so let's get started with activity 1 here. We really want to hear, I think, first, before we start talking about the project or any changes or impacts, how do you use spaces now? What's your favorite place in Battery Park City? How do you get around? It doesn't need to be in a particular reach, and we can kind of, I'll stop talking and let folks chime in. But we want to hear from you about how you use the space today.
I'm happy to start. It's Brittany again. So personally, my favorite spots is Rockefeller Park itself. You know, the swings, the playground, the dock pond, also teardrop right behind, you know, in between the buildings. I would say that it's less used by adults. I mean, used by adults, but more by kids. And it's really, really critical, you know, that flat grassy land with some shade. You know, kids are playing soccer and Little League and climbing trees and, you know, having music classes right out there. And so the more open space, grass, trees that can be created and make it usable, not, you know, something that you can play soccer on, right? Is really, really important. And I think to a lot of the people in that area.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Brittany. Does everyone agree with Brittany? I know we have Betty and Jed, who lives around the area. What's your favorite part of Battery Park City?
This is Betty. Actually, I kind of like all of them. Rockefeller Park is, I agree with what was said so far. Rockefeller Park is right outside my window, so obviously that's kind of an everyday place to go to. What I wanted to also emphasize was that the promenade, the Esplanade, is very important. And in fact, before COVID, when all the schools were really functioning, it was a place where the track teams for both the Borough Manhattan Community College and Stuyvesant High School used, as well as many employees. And I met people from the first precinct who said, of course we hang out in Battery Park City, that's where we do all our jogging. So there is a lot of movement along the Esplanade. And I live just opposite the ferry terminal. That is obviously an important place because that's where a lot of transportation is. And since our coming mayor and others have mentioned how we need more marine transportation to make our rivers more of a highway to get some of the activity off the roads, I think that's underutilized for what it's going to be in the future. Around the harbor, the marina has a lot of activities and a lot of free entertainment. So there's always a lot of people coming in from the outside, as well as all the employees. It's a beautifully kept area and very popular. And then I think the whole walking, the promenade as you head south, also a lot of people, that's where they get their activities. A lot of people sitting, watching the river, some fishing as you get really far south. They're all popular, just slightly different uses.
Very well said, Betty. Thank you. Jed, I heard you lived a little bit just north of Battery Park City, but when you come down to the area, where do you usually gravitate to?
Well, I don't use the area as much as I used to, but I was on the Stuyvesant High School track team, so I did use it when I was there. I would say Rockefeller Park is the main part which I would use when I was younger, and actually when I was a kid, we used that a lot as well. So that's always been like a kind of a mainstay place for me to use.
This is Brittany again, and I agree on the whole promenade. Like, I run there and you see lots of families and kids biking along the whole thing. I know that the volleyball court, is really important to those that, and I don't know if we're talking about just north or the whole thing right now, but is really important to those at Gateway. And I do want to mention, we do have senior citizens, and they come and they sit out at the park and use, some paved space is important, with ramps that's accessible for seniors as well as for strollers. But I also work at Brookfield. I work in American Express, and I can tell you, when people are back in the office, that whole area is also utilized by professionals walking along, the promenade, as well as I've actually personally done a bunch of work-related events at Rockefeller for different team events and whatnot. So I would say that it's also used by the professionals that work in the area.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Brittany, for that.
If I could just sort of chime in as a cyclist, coming over the various bridges to Manhattan from Brooklyn and then going along the Greenway, having those connections where you can cycle in a protected bike lane is unbelievably amazing and important for the cycling community, and both for exercise and commuting.
Thank you, Sarah. Joseph, can you give us a quick time check? How are we doing on our schedule?
I think that we probably have another minute or so before we can move on to the next activity.
Okay, great, thank you. I guess one more just prompt on this, and I know it's great to hear about sort of favorite spaces, the way they're used in different ways. Has anyone seen these spaces being used in different ways over the past year and a half? And do you find that some are more or less popular now than maybe they were before?
This is Betty. I want to say something before I forget it. Because I'm on the community board, so I want to thank Sarah's comment about the bicycling, because I'm chair of the transportation committee, and we're constantly pushing for those things. So thank you. But in terms of keeping Rockefeller flat, I've been following this whole process from the very beginning in Battery Park City. Because Wagner Park is going to be elevated, the whole comments about having a place that is a flat place where you could play soccer or do something else. And I'm a wheelchair user, so believe me, it's not me playing. I'm also an elder. But it's going to be very important to consider that when we look at the big picture of the whole community, to look at the changes that are already planned to be underway for other parts, such as Wagner Park.
Thank you, Betty. Yeah, thank you. And definitely appreciate your input always. But I think that might be a great segue to move on to activity 2, which is called shared priorities. So now we're kind of talking about, we're going to start talking about change. And the third activity that we're going to get to in the next few minutes is really about new opportunities, things that don't exist, that could be included in the project definition, could be included in the project. But before we get to new things, let's talk a little bit about things that are out there today that maybe concern you, things that are out there today that you really feel must remain without any change, or things that you've noticed on site, noticed out in the park or in North Cove or on the Esplanade that maybe aren't working so well. Doesn't need to be flood related, but that maybe could be improved in some way. So I'll kind of open the floor and feel free to let me know if that didn't make any sense.
I have a few things. This is Brittany. Like the area in front of Brookfield, right? Like they're constantly in the summer putting up tables with umbrellas, and as professional, like there's no kids sitting there and families sitting there because there's no shade. There's no grass, there's no shade. So, and then even professionals that are sitting out there trying to eat lunch or enjoying the space in their lunch hour, you know, it's limited because of the shade issue. So that could be an opportunity area of improvement, you know, that area. In the walk that I went to, number 2 is someone mentioned a really good idea was, as you know, temperatures are rising, misters in the playgrounds was a really good idea that I thought. Number 3, in South Battery Park, there is definitely not enough place for soccer and places for kids to play. Like there's that one little turf field, and if you ever go there on a Friday at 4 o'clock in the spring, that it is packed. The kids have like no room. They're running into each other. It's almost dangerous for the little kids taking tennis lessons. Like there needs to be more space for kids to do sports and activities, especially in South Battery Park. Would be a huge improvement. And then the other thing that I thought was really interesting that I learned on that walk was Pier 25 and the Hudson River Park is deciding to do nothing with their resiliency. They're fine with it flooding. And, you know, you can't contain flooding, you know, in isolation. So even if we do, you know, the best thing, it's still, if they don't do anything, it's still going to end up in Tribeca, right? That was one interesting learning that I had. You know, it has to be a coordinated effort. And then the last thing that I would say is, I know this is not in jurisdiction, but that area next to Stuyvesant that's all concrete, like there could be a lot of opportunity for that area that is really underutilized over there.
Thank you, Brittany, for that. We talked a little bit in activity 1 about Rockefeller Park and about the Esplanade in particular, the flat open area that is, you know, that's really, really well utilized and loved in Rockefeller Park, and the movement along the Esplanade. Does anything come to mind when you imagine walking up and down the Esplanade or riding your bike or going to or from Rockefeller Park that you may have an idea about tweaking or something that could be helpful? Or simply just things that you've noticed that maybe aren't working so well you want to mention? Betty, I think you had spoken a lot about the different groups that use the Esplanade. How do you view the Esplanade now? Is it perfect the way it is? Do you see accidents between bicycles and pedestrians? You know, not to make a leading question, but I know you have a lot of great thoughts on this.
Well, you can tell, well, the problem is all complaints come to me anyway because of the transportation committee. And I always get complaints about these bikes got too close to me. In reality, what I observe, I don't see a lot of problems. Right now, the numbers are down since COVID. So that's a little misleading. I know there is concern around lines forming around the ferry terminal, but there have been proposals that the lines would just be would be directed along the edges of the Esplanade and lead out versus transecting, which for a while they did when the Port Authority was using that for their weekend when the PATH train was down. Mm-hmm. And so I think actually that's probably going to be pretty manageable. So I don't foresee any really large problems that we're in a big city.
I think as having young kids and whatnot, like I do bike too, like, you know, you're always kind of concerned about bikes, but I don't find myself concerned about it on the promenade in Battery Park. I'm more concerned, and this is not in the jurisdiction, and I know that they have lanes on the bike path, but they come flying right along the West Side Highway, breaking traffic laws. And I'm always concerned with that one of them, you know, hitting a kid, probably even more so than a car. That's the area of concern, probably not the promenade.
So it's kind of the intersection of the promenade to West Street and the West Side Highway there.
Yeah, and then like when you cross over to Warren in front of Asphalt Green, you know, those crosswalks, they'll come flying across there. They changed the biking traffic laws a few years ago because of an accident that happened, but it hasn't addressed it for kids.
There's a couple of folks on the line who've been pretty quiet so far. I just want to take a moment and see if Natasha, maybe your audio is working, or if you'd like to put something in the chat, if you have any thoughts, or Jed, or if you have any more ideas. And I see we have someone new on here, Corey, as well. Feel free to jump in and welcome.
I would like is mostly green space is the main thing, which I find to be important. And that seems to be mostly in Rockefeller Park. I was kind of curious if there's any plans for what's happening slightly north on the waterfront, or is that just that's a totally different jurisdiction? Mm-hmm. Like right off the West Side Highway, is there a plan to kind of do any increases there? And as for I also have kind of questions about what the resiliency plans are, kind of, and if there's some like kind of like integrated plan with all of this. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, Jed, and Brittany kind of alluded to that. Joseph, if we could actually just zoom out real quick and look at the overall map. Of course, this project is concerned with protection of Battery Park City and its assets. So the extent of what we can kind of talk about and provide input on today is what's shown in different colors. The reason why it cuts inland across West Street there on the left side, all the way up to North Moore at Greenwich, is to tie back to high ground. So almost like you're playing with sand and you're making a pond kind of at the water. We're attempting to create a continuous line of protection from a high point at the northern side of the project, all the way around and connecting where it says Reach 7 to the South Battery Park City project. That ultimately connects to different projects that are part of the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency. Betty, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question sort of related to that. The tieback is always talked about, and you can see it's across West Street.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly kind of structure would there be across that bike lane, across Route 9A? I mean, what are we talking about there? Because I know that the rain that we had from the flooding we had from Superstorm Sandy was due to the water rushing down southbound on West Street and flooded us from that direction. So curious, what do we do with West Street?
That's a very important area, and you're right. It's a breach point that kind of wraps around the backside of Battery Park City. Of course, we can't say for sure because remember at the very kind of beginning part of the project. But the most likely scenario in crossing the road will be to use a mechanical deployable or a flip-up gate that will be flat in the ground at pretty much all times unless there's a storm, and it will be raised. So that would connect on either side of West Street to some kind of fixed structure, a column, or a flood wall embedded into a planter or something like that, or seating. And when a storm event occurs, that gate would flip up to prevent water from breaching in that point. But of course, the majority of the time, and I'm glad, I'm going to forget who said this now, I think maybe it was Brittany, mentioned the safety of people crossing, kids and other cyclists at the Hudson River Greenway there. Because one important consideration is sightlines. Of course, we have to maintain safe distances for sightlines so that when you're approaching an intersection like that, we're not putting anything in the way that would prevent someone from seeing a kid or seeing a cyclist. So the arrangement and location of the flip-up gates and the columns that they hit is really detailed in that area. Of course, again, we don't know what it is necessarily, but I think that's a pretty likely scenario.
Thank you for at least giving some speculation, because again, since I'm with transportation, it would be interesting as they move on to that, just how long the bikeway and or the roadway would be shut down when deployables are used. We talk about a day, 2 days, 4 days. Ultimately, that would be of interest to know. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's a great question.
I think we're about out of time on this activity. So is everyone okay with moving to the next one?
Great, thanks, Joseph.
Just really quick. There was another interesting idea on that one of the resiliency walks that came up that I did want to put in here on the record was that it is possible not to expand the pier west, but when you're looking at that that green area, is that you could expand it north too, and even get maybe more space or more green. Someone threw out an idea of like a pool. Could you get an outdoor pool up top that's raised, or some way that you could like soak up and actually add more green space to the area. So I did want to put that one on record as well, that you can build north of that. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
No. Thank you, Brittany. Yeah, and you're right. There's a little bit of an opportunity to expand northwards. We're in Reach 2 and potentially Reach 3. Of course, on the west side, we're constrained by the Pier headline, which basically runs immediately along the edge of the Esplanade. So that's correct. But that's actually a great segue, Brittany, to kind of move into activity 3. So we were kind of talking about things that are out there today that we may, definitely want to keep. We heard flat lawn areas and things out there that maybe aren't working so well. Now we really want to kind of dig into new things that aren't there today that may be beneficial. that you may think would be a good addition to a park or to the plaza. So new amenities that maybe don't exist in these parks that that could be great. And for example, I think a good one that's come up already is the idea we talked about North Cove Marina and how temporary umbrellas and things like that need to be put out a lot of the time because there's not enough shade. And so that's that's a great example of that. That could be a new opportunity for North Cove to add more shade potentially. So are there areas that you think could be enhanced or improved or changed? Again, that doesn't have to relate to flood resiliency, but in your experience out there in these parks and open spaces in the Esplanade.
Hi, this is Jose, and the way I use Battery Park City is primarily through the North Cove. I come in on the transit lines, and then I work my way west, and spend a lot of time coming through. And usually I would stop first at the Winter Garden because there used to be a lot of events there. Then bring my family down, and then we would eventually migrate and walk up the plaza past what used to be the Mercantile Exchange, but work our way north to Belvedere Plaza. Never quite made it to Rockefeller Park because we would just kind of get tired out. We knew we had a long walk back to the transit center subway lines. But one thing as a visiting person coming in from outside of Battery Park, you could never have enough comfort stations or restrooms, and I know they're not, most people don't really want to because it's very about people congregating, other activities, but work from North Cove, working your way south, I think there could be an opportunity for figuring out how to maybe work in a comfort station. And that would really service, the visitors or the business people that kind of work their way west.
Great, yeah, thank you for sharing, Jose. That's fantastic, and I think we've heard right already about how important it is about that commuter connection between the ferry terminal into Brookfield Place. We heard about the queuing, the lines that potentially queue around there and what we're calling Reach 4. So yeah, that's a great point. Betty, I see you have your hand up. Betty, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Sorry. There are so many stairs that are just kind of gratuitously placed in a lot of locations versus ramps or something that would allow people like me to move around. And that also includes people who have strollers with them. If it could be made to be a little bit more seamless so that people can move around and be included versus always excluded. If I want to get from the ground, for instance, around North Cove Marina to anywhere, I have very limited number of ramp places. I have to go way out there to be able to get to the next level. Everybody else climbs the stairs, which they may or may not like doing, but nevertheless, they can. So I have very limited access to a lot of places simply because stairs are put everywhere. I mean, even going from the Esplanade out to the streets, they have one side that might be ramp, but one will be 2 or 3 stairs. Like, why all these stairs?
That's a really excellent point, Betty. Thank you for bringing it up.
It's a great point, Betty. Great point.
Can I, while we're talking about accessibility, though this might be out of the range, but one thing, just putting on record is that Brookfield building where there's the Laughing Man by the terminal, the ferry terminal, they absolutely need a handicap accessible door, like especially in the winter when there's winds, like you can't get in, they lock them, and then the other ones are so heavy you can barely open it with a stroller, and I'm sure someone in a wheelchair really cannot access that building.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Joseph, I bet we're almost at time, is that right?
Yeah, we're set to return to the main room at 7:10, it looks like. So
Okay,
we've got about
yeah.
5 minutes left together.
So super quick, before we kind of go back and look at what we've all talked about, and Brittany kind of, craft a couple of bullets for you to report back. We talked a lot about, in this third activity, about North Cove, but I just wanted to open the floor if there's other areas in Battery Park City that you may want something else to be added or something to be changed.
Can I just sort of chime in for a second about some resiliency approaches that happen in places in the Netherlands, like Copenhagen and other spots that are actually at sea level, where they've figured out in their public parks and public plazas a design where we have an opportunity here in rebuilding things to include flood protection, where spaces that in dry days are useful for people as playing fields and playgrounds are designed to capture and hold water when there's a downpour or a cloud burst or a flood, so that it holds it and prevents the storm sewer overflow, but is also then not destroyed when the water fades away, because it's been designed to be a holding pool that is either landscaped or green space, i.e. either man-made or natural materials, where I just think that there's a lot to be learned from that approach.
Yeah, Sarah, I totally agree with that. And sorry to
yeah, no problem. I was done.
Yeah.
I was done. Thanks.
But yeah, I think I just wanted to say super quickly in response to that, that aligns perfectly with Battery Park City's sustainability goals. The idea of using green infrastructure or detention tanks that can double as a playing field or a plaza. I think that's a really well said, a good point. Yeah.
Can I make one last point about resiliency?
Oh yeah, of course, go ahead, Betty.
My building, which I said is on River Terrace, we get flooding out of Teardrop Park. In fact, we've replaced the flooring in the building twice because of water damage. Now, it's true individual buildings are going to have to do more. I get that. But if there is a look at some of the other spaces to see where there's runoff, especially from storm events versus just water rise, that would be very helpful because we are getting water.
Thank you, Betty, for that. Yeah, I think that's definitely good to hear, and we'll take note of it.
Good to hear.
Okay, we have 2 minutes. So what I'd like to do quickly here is go back and try and capture some of the key points for the report back session. We'll have a few minutes each group, so not a whole lot of time to kind of report back what we've all talked about. And I think we've covered some really good stuff. So we started with talking about the importance of flat open areas. And you all feel free to jump in and let me know if I've missed something or misspeaking. And Brittany, this is for you to report back. And I'm taking notes. So what will happen is that I'll kind of write down the notes that we've been taking in the background, drop them into the group chat when we get back into the main room so you can reference those.